Greetings, everyone. This is a interview conversation between myself and my newly met friend, Joseph Gregory Hallett, or Greg as he likes to be known, I assume. This is a presentation of the Gemstone Global Media. And this is the first time I've met Greg in person or by electronic means. I've been studying his work for several years, and I find it quite extraordinary, and it has assisted me in my life path of integrating what I call the sweep of history and the fabric of history. The fabric as in many woven threads of parallel and intersecting and bisecting timelines and events and so forth, most of which is hidden. And we're going to be talking about hidden history here, hidden from most people. We'll start on the premise that for most people in this world, everything you think is real is a lie. And the history we're going to talk about is revealing the truth. Primarily, initially, talking about such things as bloodlines, monarchies, thrones, crowns, and things like that. Things that I've studied myself for 40 to 50 years. And when I encountered Greg's work, it opened up a tremendous field of elements that I knew were there. I just didn't know all the detail. So to begin, Gregg and his co-author, Francisco Manoel, or the British exilarch Francisco Manoel, and Joseph Gregory Hallett, co-authored this book. If we can get it without the light. It's called The Hidden King of England, Arma Christi. It's a 5-volume set, and it has a big image there, a signet, which Greg will tell us a little bit of what that is. And to summarize, basically, it is the hidden history, especially of the last 200 years, of what has really happened with the bloodlines that have taken control of the British monarchy, the British crown, the throne, the current sitting monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, who she really is in terms of her family line, who she isn't in terms of her family line, and things like that. So, Greg, would you like to start with anything in that context? Well, let me say this before you do, that there are many resources of Greg's work. This book, this 5-volume set, is absolutely a must for anybody who would like to know the true history of the world that we live in and what affects our law and our money systems and things like that. But you've done many interviews over the years, and you've told a lot of the detail of the story. So I don't want to spend a lot of time in all of that. We can refer people to those interviews because I have a very wide and deep study of all of these kind of subjects. There are things that I would like to go deeper, not repeat the same content, the same interviews you've done before. I'd like to go deeper and ask some questions and see where we go in the conversation and see if we can bring more of the hidden out to be revealed. So with that, Greg, let's
I have to live up to my own reputation now.
That's right.
Yes, right. Okay, I haven't done an interview for a year, for 12 months. Last one was 9th of November 2017. And various things have happened which indicate that what I've been saying is absolutely true, the truth right on the button and touching a nerve. So I did my last interview on the Thunder Oak, where Tropical Storm Gregg came from Mexico and followed the path of Tropical Storm John and then jumped to where I am in Dis. And it was an out of this world supernatural storm. It was like 200% moisture from ground all the way up, no lightning, but thunder. And it was just moving, and it moved towards my profile oak tree that I was photographed in front of. And that oak tree is exactly 777 meters from where I am now, where I sit and work. And 777 is the number of the end times, the times of the end, and the Shin, which is the forbidden secret. And I've been running the Shin, the forbidden secret, since 2010 and possibly well before. And I was chosen to represent the end times with my co-author Francisco Manuel, and then I represented the New Age. The last time that happened was a couple of thousand years ago. So the storm, tropical storm Gregg, jumped from Mexico, and Mexico, X means the true King of England. That's what it's code for. So if you loop Mexico, it reads, "Me, true King of England, I come. Me, true King of England, I come." Do you understand?
Sure, of course.
And then in the last page of Revelation in the Bible, it says, "I will come quickly." And it mentions the word "come" 5 or 6 times in the last page. If you include the last paragraph of the previous page, it's 5 or 6 times. So it absolutely came quickly, and it split the thunder, not lightning. There's no lightning struck on the oak tree. It split the thunderbolt, not lightning, thunderbolt sound, split a third of the oak tree off, which also fulfills the Bible prophecy. And then what it revealed, when the bit that fell down, was Anubis, right? A clear life-size Anubis who's 7'11". And so I photographed it, and then it said in a frozen sea green lake, which was the ground frozen green, and then it should be surrounded by a crown of gold. And when the tree fell down and started to die, it turned autumn at the same time as autumn and produced a crown, which is very close to Queen Victoria's ruby coronet. And then it said an 80-year-old guy with an axe would be there with hail and incense. So I went back to the tree, and there's an 80-year-old guy there with a chainsaw, which is a powerful axe, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And he was cutting up the tree and burning bits of it, which was smoke. And there's hail coming down, but it was more like sleet, right? But it was just so close. Mm-hmm. So what I realized is that the whole world was run on predictions. And we are incredibly attuned to predictions and are always trying to predict things. And when you have two things, there's different methods of prediction, different works. Like there's the tradition received, there's the Bible, especially Revelations and a bit of Daniel, and there's the Book of Predictions, and there's the Rosicrucian cosmography. And when a prediction is happening, it takes precedence over everything else. Everyone, all the other orders, so they just step aside. And according to the Bible, you need 2 predictions to make the claim. And I've fulfilled virtually all of Revelations. I could go through it for about 8 hours and show the images and exactly what's happened, you know, and say, here it is. And the early Christian science, the oldest Christian science, is something called typology theology, which is the transplanting of events that happened then into a new location, right? Right. So they'll have, say, the Sea of Galilee. And here's a copy of the Sea of Galilee. C is S-E-A, but it's also the letter, it's completely homophonous with the letter C, which is the Roman numeral for 100. Mm-hmm. Right? So when it transposes the Sea of Galilee, it's going to be in a body of water that's 100 times bigger or 100 times smaller. And in the fulfillment of the predictions, it was 100 times smaller. Right? And what's happening with the fulfillment of predictions is they're bringing things from all over the place, including buildings, built forms, steles, which is generally a bit of stone about this big, about this high, with lettering on it in a town that records some events. But what I've found is the stele is absolutely magnificently codified and predictive. So what I've been doing is recording predictions. And the last interview I gave on 9/11/2017, almost a year ago, that touched a nerve. So after that, I got a flu and my IQ went down to about 5% for till about March. And I could only remember my name. I couldn't remember anyone else's name. You know, and so by sort of April, I could work one day a week, focus one day a week. And then by June, I could sort of manage about every second day. And then on the 2nd of June, my publisher and webmaster was killed. She was about 500 miles from me in the Black Forest. And she was killed on Coronation Day at the hour of coronation while selling a book called The Hidden King of England, which tends to point towards Prince Chuck. Yeah. So what happens with with assassinations is that the assassins tend to codify their assassination, which is their work. They tend to codify their assassination onto the person who hired them. Right? So in this way, she was selling 5 volumes called The Hidden King of England, and she died on in German time 1:30 p.m., which is 12:30 p.m. here, on the 2nd of June 2018, which is exactly 65 years after Coronation Day, and 65 means macrocosm, microcosm. So it's a very important number. And on important dates, they try and do events that mark the event. Yeah? So, and at the same time, I was really sick with the same illness that she had, but I survived it. You know, so 500 miles apart, no communication. She's totally sick. I'm totally sick. She dies. I don't. Then that was the 2nd of June. Then all communication with that office stopped on the 14th of June. Then by the 31st of August, they had stolen £400,000, that's retail value of my books, as well as my 4 backup hard drives. My previous other backup hard drive had been stolen by a Windsor in 2015. And then in between those dates, on the 13th of July, they closed down my 3 websites.
Yeah, and they took your books off of Amazon and other resources.
Well, they've done the damage as much as they could. Like I tried to get my website in my name, get my websites in my name and transferred to me. And they wouldn't allow it. And then, yeah, so basically I got nearly killed. My webmaster publisher got killed and all my websites got closed down and all my books got stolen and all my hard drives got stolen, which is a backup for my last 20 years work. Not only that, I was sick for about 5 months and I could only just remember my name. So I probably touched a nerve.
You think?
Yeah. And the nerve I touched was that Tropical Storm Gregg left Mexico. Mexico means me, true King of England, I come. The Tropical Storm Gregg came out of Mexico, jumped to Dis, split the profile oak tree, my profile oak tree, exactly 777 meters from me, which means the shin, the end time, the end of times, and produced Anubis. And in the Egyptian Trinity, and which the Christian Trinity came out of, there are no images of Joseph in the Christian Trinity. And Joseph is Anubis in the Christian Egyptian Trinity. So when they revealed Anubis, they were saying that I was Joseph, right? And in saying that I was Joseph, they were confirming all of my claims and all of my videos, saying that I am the head of the house of Joseph, which is the highest house.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the house of the Father.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they're not denying it anymore. And the Anubis connection is to do with the Heb-Sed festival, which was given to the pharaohs. And the pharaoh means, they were never called pharaohs. Pharaoh means ruler. It was the Greeks that applied the name pharaoh, which came from a ceremony in a Pari temple. But they were always just the ruler. And what they would do to reinvigorate their rule was to do the Heb-Sed festival, which was run around a rectangle, 4 stones, and then people in the town or city would be all around just cheering vigorously, and then be put into a cave-like situation and take some drug or don't take some drug, get administered something by the priest, and then have an out-of-body experience, and then collect some knowledge which would be beneficial to civilization. And that was the Heb-Sed festival. So they put on a Heb-Sed festival for me, 1970 to 1980, and that's how I learned some of the tricks.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then they put on another Heb-Sed festival for me in June 2014, possibly going to September 2014. So that leads to some really deep stuff. And what happened with the first Heb-Sed festival, which I passed, which is rare. It's very rare to pass a raw Heb-Sed festival. It's a raw initiation, and it does involve out of body, but it's not out of body experience. It's you get forced out of your body. They try to kill your body while you're out of your body. You got to jump back in your body, save your body. You do that 3 times in about 5 minutes. And during that time of terror fear, you get all the downloads you need to alter civilization for the rest of your lifetime. That's actually how it works, right? And, you know, I don't tell... Afterwards, I called an ambulance. And the ambulance driver wouldn't come closer than 20 yards from me because I was so electrified, if you like.
Mm-hmm. Glowing. Glowing.
Well, I wouldn't say it was bliss. It was.
Well, I didn't say bliss. I just said glowing.
Yeah.
A strong electromagnetic field.
Oh, yeah. Huge. Yeah, exactly. So they put on another one in 14th of June 2014, just before the start of the end times. They announced that I was dead. And I didn't actually get to see that until the 19th of June, 5 days later, which is the time of a Heb-Sed festival. It's usually 5 days. And so I was actually living, I'd finished all my books, ran out of money. I was doing what I'd always wanted to do, which was live in a cave in Europe. And I was living with this cave right by the sea, which was actually the predicted cave. It was actually absolutely predicted that I would be there at that time. So I was in the cave, no electricity, and 5 days later, I'm announced dead. 5 days later, I go to a friend's place, said, can I, turn my computer on? So I get these emails, and so we're sitting around. And then I get all the web messages that I'm announced dead, which was the second Heb-Sed festival. And it's quite rare to have 2 Heb-Sed festivals. They're usually given to a ruler who's ruled for 30 years. He has a Heb-Sed festival. So my first Heb-Sed festival was 1980, and 34 years later was 2014, second Heb-Sed festival. And it's just, well, I tell you what, it just means that when there's codes to be broken, I can break the codes. I just see them straight away.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to stop you there and kind of back up and fill in a little bit
Yeah,
and ask a couple of my questions that I have had. Just for people who are watching who don't have the context, aren't familiar with your work or who Francisco Manuel is and all of that, um, the the context of that, you've used some terms like the Shin that you
yeah,
talk about in the book, and
yeah,
that is defined as a specific period from 1812 to 2012
yeah, yeah,
that things were basically hidden and underground, that things had to be fulfilled and so forth. And Francisco is the lineal descendant and heir from a specific man, um, and who was the legitimately born son of Victoria and George V in 1834. So I have a question here because you're referring to you, who you are, and in relationship to your position. But it's my understanding from reading the book that basically the hidden king with that lineal descent is actually Francisco. So can you explain, maybe give a little context of that lineage, what happened in 1834, and then what is your relationship to the bloodline or the relationship with Francisco, his position, versus how you're describing your position?
okay, I can do that. I've got Anubis behind me in the wood. So at the end, if we get round to it, I'll show you. So just so you know that the story that I just told you was concrete. So the Shin came from a dream by Amschel Mayer Rothschild in 1773, and he had a dream that he was going to breed into the Sangreal lineage, the blood royal lineage, and that would be from the time of his death for 200 years. So he died in 1812, and in 1870, the Rothschilds purchased the rights to the overture, the 1812 overture, which was actually 1870, to mark the death of Mayer Amschel Rothschild, who was a psychic. He was known to be very psychic. So, and these psychics deal with predictions. So he put this prediction, the 1773 prediction, and it's in the Rat Archives, which is the Royal Archives Trust, which is held in the British Museum. So you can possibly look it up. So in 1815, the Rothschilds had or wanted to have the Central Bank of England. So they funded Napoleon and they funded Wellington, the Duke of Wellington, in the Battle of Waterloo to be in June 1815. But to get the message of who won the Battle of Waterloo back to London quicker than the Pony Express, the Rothschilds got the carrier pigeons and started breeding the homing pigeon in 1814, right? And where they trained the new homing pigeon in 1814 to fly back to Bank in London was 1 kilometre away from Waterloo. Right? How convenient. So the Battle of Waterloo was due to start at 4 a.m. at nautical twilight, nautical dawn. That was normal. But it was raining a bit, and the French so supposedly complained that they couldn't move their cannon and gun carriages, the wheels of them, because it was too wet in the mud. So the battle actually started at midday. Instead of going from 4 for 8 hours till midday, it started at midday and went for 8 hours and stopped just before 8 o'clock at night. So that would mean that the Pony Express was riding for a couple of hours and then it got dark, so the horse would be slower. And then they'd catch the boat across to Folkestone and then get up to London, and they were getting hassled by Rothschild agents all the way up, like maiming the horse, etc.
Mm.
What the Rothschilds did was they had their homing pigeons and they had 2 baskets, and they had males with their female breeding partner waiting in Bank in London. And they had the contrary message on the pigeon in case one got lost. So the message would be Wellington won. So if Napoleon won, they'd lift up the hatch for Wellington won and they'd fly back. And if Wellington won, which he did, they lifted up the hatch for Napoleon won. Message on the leg of the pigeon, homing pigeon, was Napoleon won. And that flew back to Bank in 2 hours, 40 minutes. So when they were let out at 8 p.m., they got to Bank at 2 hours, 40 minutes, which is 10:40. And at 10:43, the astronomical twilight ended. So it was too dark for the pigeons to see. So the whole thing was exquisitely timed. So what Nathan Mayer Rothschild did then is he read the message from the pigeon and it said, Napoleon has won. So he goes down to the commodity bourse, which is the stock exchange, and he says, Napoleon has won.
Mm-hmm.
And all the British, including the British royal family, they just cashed in their shares and got whatever they could for them, which was pennies on the dollar, or pence on the pound. And then the lame Pony Express horse rider comes in a day and a half later, and he says, Wellington won. Meanwhile, Nathan Mayer Rothschild had got his agents to buy up all of the commodity bourse shares backing Duke of Wellington. So when the real news came in, Nathan Mayer Rothschild had made such a large amount of money that he's never declared it. The Rothschild family never declared how much they made, but it bankrupted the British royal family, and the Rothschilds now had the breeding rights to the British royal family.
And they took control of the Bank of England.
Yeah, and previously the Bank of England, up until about 1837, the biggest depositor of the Bank of England, in the Bank of England and the Bank of Scotland, was Lord Morgado Carvalhal. And the Carvalhals owned Carvalhal, the Palace of Carvalhal, which is also Stoy Palace, which means Easter and resurrection. And that was where the predictions of me were made. And the Hepsed festival that I just told you about is actually codified in the colonnade cross at Stoy Palace. So it gets really deep, and then I have graphics to help people understand it, you know. But yeah, so so the world's run on predictions, and there's often contrary predictions happening, and you often get, so let's say the Rothschilds taking over the British royal family, and then there's predictions that how that family will be revived and who will do it, right? Who will break the code? Who will write the book? And it said the tradition received prediction was that it would be someone from Lemuria, which is New Zealand, Australia, and Papua New Guinea. And the way they described it, the way they defined which of those countries it was through the royal style and titles. So Queen Elizabeth II, not really the Queen, it's called Elizabeth II, she had her own part in it and was absolutely going out of her way to name me as the person who would fulfill the predictions, including putting my name on the coins and taking her image off the coins.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so yeah. So what happened then is that the British, the Rothschilds had the breeding rights to the British royal family, so they bred with Princess Victoire Louise, and they gave Queen Victoria scopolamine, which is a date rape drug. Prince Albert, who died a virgin and was in a bigamous marriage, he held her hand while she was given scopolamine, which completely relaxes your muscles, but makes you aware of what's happening. And that produced 9 Batard royal, Flatlie royal family children, who are Queen Victoria's 9 official children. They're all Rothschild bastards.
Right. So just to fill in, so the audience who hasn't read any of the books, couple of key pieces. So Nathan Rothschild, who was a patriarch after his father died in 1812, he fathered Queen Victoria's mother, Victoire Louise, and
Nathan Mayer Rothschild was the oldest son, and the youngest son was Baron Jacob Mayer de Rothschild, the French Baron Rothschild. And they had what's called, in royal circles, it's called a Merovingian Bestia Neptuni procreation tradition, which the French call a threesome or a ménage à trois. We would call it a threesome. And the seed that took hold was the French Baron Jacob Mayer de Rothschild. So that produced Queen Victoria.
Right.
And the Duke of Wellington revealed to Princess Victoria this secret when she was about 10 years old, by opening up the door and showing her mother, Princess Victoire Louise, in a sexual act with her secretary. Queen Victoria then secretly married the second in line to the throne, who was blind Prince George of Cumberland. And he got Princess Victoria pregnant. They were both 14. And then they married on British Mother's Day. France didn't have a Mother's Day at the time, in Mont Saint Michel, which is Normandy, which is, or Brittany, it's on the border. And Brittany is called Brittany because a comet hit Britain in about 555 AD to 562 AD. For that 7-year period, the whole of Britain turned yellow. So everyone in Britain left and went to northwest France, which was then called Brittany. So in some ways, they did actually marry in Britain. And then to confirm that's Britain, they started up Arc-Manche, which is where France owns southeast England and controls southeast England, and Britain, England, UK controls northwest France and polices it a bit. So France ended up owning the Elizabeth II Bridge and then gave it to China, which is a strategic asset. So Queen Victoria got married to the second in line to the throne. Princess Victoria got married to the second in line to the throne, and that legitimized herself, and it legitimized her son, who was born 7 weeks later, and that was Prince Marcos Manoel. And that was the only true lineage thereafter of the British royal family.
Right.
So possibly because of the Hebsed Festival, the high orders absolutely knew who I was, because what happened in 1980 was, it's called the event, and it's very rare to pass the event. So I was called up to decipher the royal marks that Queen Victoria left her son, Prince Marcos Manoel, when he was 16 in 1850. And so we did that, and that's largely in Volume 1 and Volume 2 of The Hidden King of England. And that told the story. And then, Queen Elizabeth has been notifying the world of who's actually the king. So what she did in 1967 is I was introduced to King George VI's son. Officially, he doesn't have a son. He's got two daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret. But George VI didn't sire Elizabeth or Margaret. And George Fitzratimer that I met in New Zealand was King George VII. And when I met him, they changed the New Zealand currency from British pounds and pence to New Zealand dollars and cents. So that's a mark. It's a huge mark because it's currency, and one of the coins is a crown, you know. And they retained the British crown in New Zealand, so it was kind of usable for another till about 1971. And then that was 1967, and then 1968, the Rothschilds or the Royal Mint or Queen Elizabeth herself started to put my name on the coins on the 25th of April 1968 on the 5p coin. The coin started to read Elizabeth II Gregg, which is very nice of her. Because on the coins, they're written in all caps, right? All caps letters have to be read as though they're in ancient Latin. Well, they are in ancient Latin. So then when you read them as how they appear to be in English, it reads Elizabeth II Gregg Hallett Ibis. And the tradition received is the king is delivered by the ibis, right? And in the name Elizabeth is Hallett. And what's left over is IBEZ. And the code for that is 3 strikes and you're out. The E becomes an I. Yeah. And that's why they invented 3 strikes and you're out. It's a code. And the other is you just get the Z and you look at it in a rear vision mirror. It's an S. We all have mirrors now. So then what they did was they gradually put Elizabeth II Gregg on all the coins, ending with the £2 coin on the 15th of June 1998. And the days between the Elizabeth II Gregg going on the 5p coin and going on the £2 coin is 11,011 days. And 11 means M. So it reads M0M, which spells
Mom.
Digital mum, M0M, mum, you know. So that's kind of interesting, right? Because when you get into the Egyptian mythology and the Egyptian pharaohs or rulers, that you often get mother and son, or sometimes get the mother and son, and the son marries the mother, or the mother marries the son, right?
Right.
Whether it's consummated, whether it produces children, it just puts things in the level of the myth, right? So it means that it's placed way up there. So I made a little prediction that there would be no work on the apartment next door, and then as soon as I started to do an interview, there would be a guy drilling in the party wall. And it's just happened. I don't know if you can hear it, but he's just started drilling through the party wall.
Okay.
So it's like people get controlled into being at certain places at certain times to do certain things, like create some noise pollution.
Sure. All right. So back to my question.
So you want to know how did the transfer happen?
Well, not so much that yet, but you know, so you filled in where the Rothschilds came in 1815 and onward to have breeding rights. Victoria had a true wedding with blind King George, who was a Hanoverian and Prince of Hanover. and produced Marcos Manoel, that produced the lineage that has ended, or so far, with Francisco, and I believe he has a son. So that is a certain bloodline lineage that is recognized. And throughout the book, or the series of books, the volume of books, The Hidden King, everything is pointed at Francisco and or his progeny or his son being the true hidden king. Okay, so I'm still, and then I hear what you say about Lemuria and would emerge out of Lemuria, where you're from, originally New Zealand, and all of that with the coinage. But I'm still unclear how your position is, as you were describing it, essentially as the true king, as opposed to why isn't Francisco? Or is there a co-relationship there? Can you explain that so we're clear? Because I'm not quite clear on that.
Yeah, I can understand. I've got a lot of graphics that go with what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So which I could, we could do in detail talks for about, say, 8 hours, and I can show you all the detail.
Sure. Well, maybe we'll get to that in subsequent sessions.
Well, the original agreement we had was that I would write the book and we would get it published. And I would write the book and do all the research, and he would find a publisher and he would do the same number of interviews as me, same amount of hours as me. He didn't find a publisher. I found the publisher. I arranged the finance for the whole thing, which was about 300,000 euros. And he's done no interviews. And I gave him 8 years. And what I got was, once I sent him the books and done it, I didn't get a phone call saying, well done. It was 4.5 years' work. So I rang him up and he said, yeah, nice, thanks. Yeah, we're really pleased. And then a few days later, I got a text which was just completely off the wall, just terminating all relationship.
Wow.
And he took my financer with him. So I had no finances at the end of the project, and I didn't even have enough finances to drive for 3 hours up to the marketing meeting, which I'd also arranged, with big banner on the end of a plane, giving the title of the book, and then in the papers, local papers, where the talk would be, etc., promoting the books. So I was left, after 4 years' work and raising all the funds and just exhausting all the funds, I was left living in a cave by the sea, right? But what happened recently is I found out that the cave was predicted in the Book of Predictions, which was written in the 1st century AD and left about 6 to 8 miles north of Faro. And that was found by Sir Walter Raleigh on a British Let's Steal Portugal and Spain's books and put them in the Bodleian Library expedition, right? So they, in 1596, the British went to Spain, to Cadiz, and raided it for books. And then the drill's just, can you hear the drill? It's fantastic, isn't it?
I've got somebody running water above me, which they shouldn't be doing. But
really right under the party wall. So Walter Raleigh got the Book of Predictions and didn't give it to his commander Howard, didn't give it to Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth I, and he kept it for himself and started Rosicrucianism, right? Now, what he did from the book, he could read and write in 6 languages, Raleigh. So as soon as he got the book, he scanned it and understands it all. And he goes ahead of the others and leaves and goes to where my cave was and takes photos of it. Does sketches of it and notes it and draws my cliff face, etc. And he spends a day and a night there. And when I moved into that cave, locals who'd been in the family in that area for hundreds of years came to me and they said, Sir Walter Raleigh came and visited your cave, this cave.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh yeah, rings a bell, kind of know the name. And so what happened was that he got the book of predictions and he cognosized it into a one drawing, which is a highly codified drawing called the Rosicrucian Cosmography. And it predicts who will run the end times and new age and when they will be and where they will be and what the name of the person is. And it gives the name of the person as Joseph Gregory Hallett, which is my name. And it gives the dates in a field about July 2014 and in a field about July 2017, which are absolutely accurate. And it names the leader of Russia and names the leader of America. It shows what I'm doing. It names the Shin. It names when I was born. It's just fantastic. So, and it names me as the Boy King. Uses the word Tut, as in King Tut, and it's written in a Memphis style. So I think what happened was once I'd finished the book, that Francisco's brother-in-law, who's highly intelligent and a Rosicrucian, said, so you left Greg living in a cave, that cave, right. This cave here, points to the drawing, cliff face. Look at this, that says Joseph, look at that. Colon 604, that says second name Gregory, right? You've made him the Rosicrucian Boy King.
I see.
Right? So the prediction takes precedence. So I ended up living there for about 123 days, most of the time, like more than 100 days of that 123 days. And it was fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic. Like cuttlefish lighting up at night, looking down a 40-foot cliff face, cuttlefish lighting up at night, dolphins going past, tourist pirate boats going past, 2 channels, day and night, 2 ads, dawn and dusk, no electricity, and crystal blue waters. And it was about 300 meters from the shops. Go up, do my shopping, go back to my cave, look at boating, etc. See, and it was just absolutely what I needed after 4 years on a computer.
Yeah, and that was in Portugal.
That was in Portugal, in the Algarve. And the way they said that it would be in the Algarve is in the bottom right corner of the picture, they've got St. Anthony, who's holding an anchor. That's what St. Anthony does. And St. Anthony is the saint of Lisbon and Portugal. So it was saying this will happen in Portugal.
Sure. By the way, we live at the base of Mount St. Antonio.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Really? Great.
So we're speaking from San Antonio.
Yeah, excellent. It's also my Portuguese name is Antonio Pera. It means pure Antonio. Well, that's grand. That's excellent. So that's what happened, and I've had no communication since. So Francisco's done no interviews, as far as I know.
And he has not been in touch for 4 years now.
Yeah, not been in touch. And then, and no finances, the finances just not him either, so all gone. After I'd done the work, all gone. Everyone says, great book, really well done, fantastic. And then, so no marketing budget, nothing. So then I didn't start with this theory, I just came across this information, the Rosicrucian Cosmography. And then what happened was Sir Walter Raleigh found my name, and then bred himself into my lineage.
Mm-hmm.
So Sir Walter Raleigh is my great times 13 grandfather.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I see that then. Okay.
Which is nice, you know.
And what is his ancestry?
Well, he was married to Elizabeth Throckmorton, who was Henry VIII's granddaughter.
Okay.
And Sir Walter Raleigh's mother-in-law was half-sister with Elizabeth I.
Okay.
So Sir Walter Raleigh was part of royalty. He's great friends with Sir Francis Bacon and Sir Robert Devereux, who were half-brothers and who were the children of Elizabeth I as well.
Right.
So he was basically the only non-royal surrounded by royals. You know, he was part of the royal family, and he's pretty much the most famous non-royal person in England right through history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then I found out that...
Okay, well, that explains that, and that's interesting, because it did, when reading the book, before I became clear of your declaration of who you are, you know, because the theme of the book, or the 5 volumes, is essentially that there is a lineage and a bloodline going back to Akhenaten, coming through the so-called Davidic line. You mentioned King Tut, and you mentioned Egypt as being the Trinity, or the original template of the family, father, mother, prodigal son, which was basically Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and King Tut, or Tutankhamen. And, you know, if you can't take the 3 letters T-U-T and you soften the T, you get a D, and you harden the U, you get a V, and there you get DVD. And there's that phonetic mirroring of the Davidic root, or phonetic starting point of the claim of a Davidic line, leading all the way up to the insertion of the Rothschilds into the so-called royal line. And even though Marcos Manoel is considered the true legitimate son, the fact is that his mother and his grandmother still were Rothschilds, or had Rothschild genetics or bloodline in it. And so I'm kind of getting the impression that at some point there was, in the period we have been in the last 10, 15 years and where we are now, from what you just related, that Francisco effectively terminated that lineage, or that claim. And there's sort of like a switch of lineages or bloodlines that now has precedence or preeminence with your standing. Would you agree with that?
That appears to be what's happened.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It does. And so what happened was that in terms of the occult, you've got things like Freemasonry, Rosicrucian, Templars, Illuminati, and Prior to Sion up the top.
Right.
And about the 2nd of June, the Prior to Sion contacted Francisco, who contacted me and said that we'd been chosen to represent the end times.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted a sacrifice. And that sacrifice was me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I'm standing on the same cliff face that Sir Walter Raleigh had drawn. So I had to come out of my cave. So I got in a cave. And if you're going to be a biblical figure, you have to live in a cave, right?
Yeah.
They all lived in caves at some time. Now, if you've lived in a cave, especially the gentleman living in a cave, you know, you might be fulfilling a biblical prophecy. So I come out of the cave, answering the phone, and stand on the exact cliff face that Sir Walter Raleigh had drawn that had been predicted in the 1st century AD in the Book of Predictions. And I'm getting this phone call, and it's a bit fuzzy, saying, you know, we've been selected.
I've got good news, and I got bad news. You've been selected to represent the end times, But you've been selected for the sacrificial sacrament,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And then, and then in the next week after that, about 7 people around me died. There was a car accident. A guy got stabbed on the beach about 400 yards away. He swam around in front of my cave screaming help, and I didn't did I hear that? I'm not sure. You know, choppy waters, and I was about 9 paces back from the cave top. And then next day he swims around to another 300 or 400 yards, lands there, and gets stabbed again and killed. He got killed, and then so French tourist, young teenage girls driving down, and they got hit by a truck, and I heard that. Truck pulled out and hit that, and 1, 2, or 3 died there. And then about 9 kilometers away, there was a gas explosion in a house, and a famous artist and his gay lover, they got killed. These are all within hearing distance. And then Rick Mail came to film 340 meters from me. And then instead of staying the night, he flew back that day, and he died the next day about 1:30 of undisclosed condition. So, coincidental? I don't know. But a lot of people died, and I didn't, which I'm slightly happy about. But anyway, so I represented we represented the end times, and 2 people represent the end times, and 1 person represents the new age. And you got Ouroboros, which is around the sun. So you got basically, it's a blue snake and a yellow snake. You're seeing in color, and they flash on and off, and they're chasing each other around the sun for 2,000 years. Or 2,005.
Ouroboros is a snake that's eating its tail.
Yeah, well, it's actually 2 snakes, one chasing the other.
Okay, yellow and blue.
So you got a leading snake and a following snake. The following snake betrays the leading snake and eats it, swallows it.
Okay.
And then regurgitates it. And that's the act of betrayal, as you see in biblical stories, etc. Acts of betrayal. Judas betrays Jesus, right? It's act of betrayal. And the person who's betrayed is the one that represents the new age. So that's how I came to represent the new age. I represented the end times with Francisco, and it's 40 days. And it's from the 7th of July, 2014, which is 777, which is actually the number of the end times, 777. And it's actually, 777 is actually written above the windows in Stoy Palace, which was exactly 51 kilometers away, exactly. And that's called the End Times Palace. And it's got 777 written above the windows, but it's actually done to make it look like Christmas pine trees. And when the light catches it, there's your 777. So, whether Francisco betrayed me or actually put me in the position because he had seen my name come up on the Rosicrucian cosmography as the person predicted to represent the end times new age and be the boy king, as my name was on the coins from the age of 6 and then to 36, from 1968 to 2008 and ongoing. And when I turned 56, at that time, there was 56 billion UK coins with my name on it. Elizabeth to Greg. And then Elizabeth had taken her face off the coins in 1968 and used her body double. She's got a name, something like Mrs. Sanderson, something like that. And you can see Mrs. Sanderson on the coins because she's got a different chin. It's more cannibalistic. It's a greasier, bigger, clumpier chin. All right, and that's Mrs. Sanderson. It's not Elizabeth.
Mhm.
And when Elizabeth was sick a couple of years ago to do the Queen's speech at Christmas, New Year, that was Mrs. Sanderson talking. Yeah. Yes. And what do you do?
Where do they keep Mrs. Anderson in the basement of Windsor Castle?
Pretty much. Yeah. Well, yeah.
But we don't need to go down that path.
No. So what's happening is the fulfillment of predictions, which I'm quite happy about, because what they've done is in many, many, many ways, not even counting the 65 billion times on the UK coins as one event, they've still named me as the boy king and the king many, 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 many times. Including Queen Elizabeth's agents briefing me as though I was the sovereign. Right? Because from about 2002 to 2009, I was an intelligence confessor, which is a position that doesn't exist, but it means sovereign. Right, because intelligence goes and confesses to the king, says, well, this is what's really happening, give me the skinny on it. And that's what I was getting, so much so that in 2007, the intelligence Christmas Eve party was at my place. Right, so, the stories can go on and on and on, and it is as surprising to me, but when I look at the book of predictions, or rather what I've got access to, the Rosicrucian cosmography, and when I'm looking at listening to royals and the Sangreal lineage, the blood royal lineage, relate the tradition received, which they often do in like a trance. They'll sit next to me and they'll go, and then they'll say some stuff that they heard on a dinner table conversation, family dinner table conversation when they were a kid, It's precious information, and they'll come out of the trance. That, and then all of Revelations in the Bible I fulfilled. Plus, I was initiated into the House of David, so I can claim to be first in the House of David, and that's what they've really been looking for. And I can say that I'm at least twice. And they've actually built something to state that I'm part of the House of David, if not first, And in that one thing, there's about 6 different things that come into it and say, yes, 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 dating back over 100 years.
Okay, so just to fill in a couple of things in for people watching, that you use phrases like sangreal, royal blood, things like that. Many people confuse things, and things have been confused purposely with this thing called the Holy Grail, supposedly a cup holding blood. And it's an interesting play on language. San, which means holy or saint in Latinized languages, French, San Graal, which means the Holy Grail. But in French, sang means blood. Real is the royal. So that's where this play on words and this switch between an image or a symbol as a cup holding blood versus the bloodline. And so what you've detailed is those converging, that fabric of history I referenced, the converging of bloodlines into you by predictive documents, images, and so forth, and you ending up at the Port du Graal, or Portugal, on the coast. I always wondered for like decades, I looked at geography, history, and things, and I always wondered, well, why did Portugal get birthed? Where did this come from in the language Portuguese? And, it always seemed fairly insignificant or inconsequential in history. Although you could see where the Portuguese lineage had significant positions in certain things with the Jesuits and so forth. But I could never figure out where the name and the race or the ethnicity of Portuguese came from until I read your book. And I go, oh, of course, Port do Graal, the port of the Grail, or the Sangreal, the royal bloodline. And you mentioned the Merovingians, which some people know about, most don't, but that was a bloodline that ended up coming up from southern France between the 4th and 7th century, went into the Franks and Charlemagne to Otto the Great, which created the so-called Holy Roman Empire and all the houses of Europe. This is what I call the interweaving fabric of history. All the attempts to justify and codify in this holographic matrix we exist in, this preeminence authority to rule humanity, which I personally wholesale reject because they haven't done a very good job at it to begin with. And ultimately, when you get into the depths of it, it's all a cult of death. My background, my expertise is almost 30 years of studying law and money mechanics and how that's evolved in history, and how all the esoteric things, elements, numerology, language, gematria, and so forth, how that's woven into the legal and the monetary system. You clearly have a masterful grasp of all of that and a vast compendium of historical understanding of all that. What I teach with our university and through the materials that we're bringing forward is to understand that this symbolic codification in this holographic reality we're in is what has been used to entrain our minds to project and accept or consent to this hierarchical structure of royal lines and monetary dominance and all the rest of it. So now we're moving into the new age. Okay, a new astrological new age in terms of the astronomical relationship between the solar system, the planets, the cosmology, that larger whole in the galaxy and universe we live in. And we're coming into fulfillment, as you've been talking about, fulfillment of predictive prophecies and all of that, leading to your individual embodiment, personage, and position. So if you are the boy king here to pronounce or to open the gateway, so to speak, to the new age, in our point of view, our meaning the Pantera Society and so forth, awareness is equal to responsibility. And so here we are, many people starting to emerge, as a biblical prophecy says, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. So we're all, in many ways, common people. We're suddenly waking up to a much higher sense of awareness and responsibility. So where I'd like to go from here in this dialogue is, how do you see your responsibility in the position you're in? Where do we go from here to start healing this world and setting things right in the tradition of what Lawrence Gardner called the Grail King tradition, which is that a true king is one who is truly a servant of the people and is not self-aggrandizing in the egocentric way that we see going on today.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of responsibility in what you're describing, and there has been in effect, an abdication from that bloodline leading to Francisco, as you just described it, to you. So what is your responsibility and where are we going to go from here?
Well, what I would like to do first is have some more interviews where I show the graphics so that people can get really grounded into what I'm saying, so that I establish my position first. And it's most important that comes out, because it's coming out in the media, the mainstream media already. I was in several movies last year that were directly alluding to me. X-Men, the Wolverine, Logan, the Mummy, and Baby Driver. Boy King, Baby Driver.
Mm-hmm.
The Rosicrucian cosmography shows me standing on the well, pulling a lever inside the castle, and I'm standing on the well of initiation. And the well of initiation is in Regal Era Palace in Sintra in Portugal, which Francisco's wife lived in when she was growing up. And the name next to it is in Latin, but it is a combination of Putin and POTUS, President of the United States. So I'm standing on the well of initiation, and there's basically Putin and Trump standing next to me. And I'm pulling levers inside the castle, and out of the castle is a trumpet blowing, which is trumpet, Donald Trump. So what I want to do is go through and explain this. And then as I was representing the End Times New Age, the Rosicrucians, I'm not a member of any organization. I've never met any of these people. The Rosicrucians in about April, May 2014 brought out the Rosicrucian cosmography, put it on the front cover of their journal number 10, which is only one journal a year. And it was a colorized version of the cosmography, so it was a lot clearer to see. So they kind of knew that the New Age was happening around then. And they were right, you know, as it happened a couple of months later. So what happens with the End Times is 40 days, and then the New Age is 40 days. So that's the period. And 40 days means it's code for a larger kingdom or a kingdom for longer. So the End Times was 40 days from 7 July 2014 to the 16th of August 2014, which has the numbers 777 and 787. And then it's from the 16th, the New Age was from the 16th of August to the 25th of September, which is 787 to 797. So it's highly codified, you know, so, and they say that the truth is in proportion. You know, everything must be in proportion. So you look for things that are in proportion. They can be consecutive, etc. So, you know, that was a huge event. It's a bit like the 6-5, the macrocosm, microcosm, where the macrocosm comes down and then the microcosm, so you got the 5 as the person, 6 is the whole super universe. And so what I did is I went around to archaeological sites to check them, and you know, occasionally I check them and find that they were energy points, right? So I went to this one particular archaeological site near Alvor, and it had a bit of grass on it, which is rare, and it was fine grass. And it was turning into a hexagon. The grass was turning into a hexagon pattern. I was going, that's a hexagon. And then it would turn into a pentagon pattern about a minute and a half later. And I go, it's a pentagon. And then 90 seconds later, I go, it's a hexagon. So it was a 6-5 point where there was the energy coming down, the energy going out. So it happens in places, and it happens in time as well. So the End Times New Age was a major point for that. And then after that, we had the times of the end. So the End Times New Age was predicted to be in the Rosicrucian cosmography, done in the 1st century, in Pharaoh, which means pharaoh, which means king or ruler. It was done in the 1st century, and it was predicted, and they gave the date as XX, which is 20, and then a big 1, which was a feather, and then a 4, which was another feather. And the feather is in Portuguese is Pina, and Pina Palace was built by King Dom Ferdinand II of Portugal, who had brought Marcos Manoel to Portugal, Prince Marcos Manoel to Portugal, Queen Victoria's firstborn son. And then he built the sister palace, which is called Stoy Palace, which is the Palace of Easter Resurrection, and it's the End Times Palace. So when they said it's in a field about July 2014, and they did the 1 and the 4 with a feather. They were indicating Stoy Palace, you know. So they're quite fantastic in their detail. And so as I tell the story, eventually, what I'd like to do is show you the detail as I go. I'll give you an overall now, right? And I want people to be grounded into the overall picture so they don't go, I'm blowing my own trumpet.
Yeah.
You know? I've just finished one, but I'm just finishing the study of the Rosicrucian cosmography now. It's pretty intense. It's taken me about 19 months or so. But in the Mummy, which came out with Tom Cruise movie, that came out in 2017. I think it was the 22nd of May. That actually names me. It says the mummy who plays Isis, the Egyptian goddess, which is Mary. In the Christian Trinity, it says, Hallett, you are the chosen. Joseph, do you accept? Right? And then right at the end of filming the movie on the last day, around about the last day, I was helping a friend out down in town, and this cameraman comes along surrounded by some women who were like in their about 45, 50 or something. So they come along, these women come along, and then they part. And then there's this guy with a big box camera. It's about this big box camera. And he's filming me. And I'm going, what the? Like that, right? What are you doing? Filming me, you know, because I'm trying not to be filmed. And they got that section and they stuck it in the movie as me emerging out of Big Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Big Ben is... on New Zealand Day 2012, which is the 6th of February, its name was changed to Elizabeth Tower. Right? So they had me emerging out of Elizabeth Tower. And I was about 5 stone heavier then, so you can imagine. And they've even got my shoulder width in there, you know, they've got absolutely in proportion. And then they've got half of Elizabeth just showing one eye, which means like she's an Illuminati stool and she's just there looking out of the tower, you know. And they're blowing up the tower in the movie. They're blowing up Big Ben, which is Elizabeth Tower, right? And they wanted to, they were delaying the renovation of Elizabeth Tower for about 4 years, and they needed some event to mark the start of the renovations, which would go on for another 4 years, which is during the final years of the tribulation, which is about 3.5 years, right? Which goes from about, tribulations goes from about 2010 to 2020. That's the screen there. So what they did is they started the renovations of Elizabeth Tower on the day that the US was having a solar eclipse. The solar eclipse wasn't predicted by anyone to happen, and it was a completely clouded over day. Nevertheless, the US was having a solar eclipse. So the message was, Ben means sun, right? So Big Ben means big sun. The big sun is acknowledged by us as eclipsing Elizabeth, as eclipsing the once towering Elizabeth. Yeah, get the message?
Yeah,
See,
of course, I understand.
They codify the message, right? So they're saying that New Zealand Day, so it's someone from New Zealand, is eclipsing Elizabeth. So that was on the 21st of August 2017, and they'd already named me in The Mummy, which, you know, the mummy is what British people call their mother, and, you know,
Right.
For the Queen. And they're saying, Hallett, you are the chosen. Joseph, do you accept? Right? And then she says, E, you are the heir. E, you are the heir, right? And I've got an E in all of my names. Joseph, Gregory, Hallett. It's an E in every name. It goes, E, you are the heir. And then Tom Cruise, who's playing me, nods 3 times for each E, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they've really codified it. And actually, when he was filming it, oh no, that was earlier. It was 2012. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, one time he's filming here, he's staying with an acquaintance. So, yeah. So Tom Cruise has a place in overlooking Byron Bay in east coast of Australia, and his neighbour is Hugh Jackman, who plays Wolverine.
Right.
And they both represented me in movies and named me in 2017 movies about 1 or 2 months apart, which is kind of interesting. It sounds like they're having a barbecue on their terraces overlooking Byron Bay and going, oh, let's give this guy Joseph Gregory Hallett a crack, and we'll put him in the movies. We'll name him and allude to him according. And the secret orders are going, yeah, we need to name this guy. We need to get it out there as to who he is through as many mediums as possible, film and.
So were you invited to be on the set of The Mummy?
No. I didn't even know it was being filmed. I didn't know anything about it. It was guerrilla filming. What they did when they filmed me, it was guerrilla filming.
I see. Okay.
So the guy with the big box camera comes walking down the street with 6 women in front of him, so I can't see him.
Oh,
and
I
then
see.
he's filming me from about this far away, and I'm going, what the? And that's what they used.
Okay. All right.
So no doubt there'll be a story coming out saying
Yeah.
we filmed something else or whatever, but it's recognizably me. And the dates fit and the eclipse fits.
Yeah. So back to my question. Here we are now in this time moment. Almost November. Today is October 30th. Tomorrow is their Halloween, and the next day, the Day of the Dead in 2018. A very propitious and significant pivot point coming up in a week. The elections here and all the stuff going around, all of that. I suspect next week is going to start some pretty significant things after the election. It's an interesting day. Next Wednesday is 11/7/11. So you've got your 11/11 there flanking the 7. I look at things, we as the Pantera Society look at things in a practical level. That is what our mission statement is. I introduced us in the beginning as the Gemstone Global Media. We're beginning to come out on a little bit in the public. We've kept Pantera very, very quiet and very private. We've been building it for 20 years. It's a private society. It's not a public entity. It's not a corporate entity and all of that. And Gemstone right now is a university where we teach people a lot about all this kind of stuff. History, esoterica, all of those components, the legal monetary system, but it all leads for us towards practicality. What I said just a moment ago, responsibility. We have taken on ourselves the responsibility of this world. We have significant intentions with the media to open up more levels of revelation and truth. We are in what I like to call, we're riding the waves of the apocalypse. It's a waveform moving through the particle incrustation of this overlay of the false reality, whether we're talking about false royals, flat live royals, false systems, monetary systems of bondage, things like that. That's all breaking open. We're revealing the truth. The truth brings awareness, but with awareness comes responsibility. We have taken on ourselves a responsibility to mobilize bringing the truth out, but also to ground it into real works. What are we going to do with this world? We've got 7.5 billion people, half of whom are on the edge of survival. Ecosystems are being destroyed, all of that. So with your position, and I believe you're from everything I've heard you say in this conversation, you're at a significant pivot point as well. Everything that's led up to this moment has solidified who you are, where you stand, and your position. Clearly, it's not completely free of the old. If what happened to your publisher was not an accident, and the illness you had to purge yourself through, and all of that. But from my point of view, those who stand with life and support life in this world have already won. Now it's both the cleanup and the rebirthing and the re-establishing of new systems in this world that support and enhance life and everybody in the world. So my question back to you is, what do you have formulated for yourself where your intention is going in terms of now, from this pivot point of what we've talked about so far, what does the future look like for Joseph Gregory Hallett, 3 E's, the heir of Joseph, and the guy on 65 billion coins?
Yeah. Well, I've tried to have my information heard in court. I deposited about 300 pages of information just claiming the Prince Pretender status. And
just claiming what? I didn't hear that.
I went to the High Court Queen's Bench in the UK and put a case forward and paid my £10,000 deposit to claim Prince Pretender of the United Kingdom. And if the British royal family is legitimate, they should have no problems with someone claiming to be the Prince Pretender. But the 2 judges refused to hear the case. The first judge, he had to be a High Court Queen's Bench judge, which is top judge. And the first judge was a district court circuit judge called Martin Parry, who was the lowest judge. District court circuit judge is a joke. And he signed it as though he was a High Court Queen's Bench judge. So I recused him, which means to get rid of him, start from the beginning.
Right.
And then, so I got another judge, and this time it was a High Court Queen's Bench judge, Daniel John Pierce Higgins QC. And he misread my recusing District Court Circuit Judge Martin Parry, because he was a circuit judge and not a High Court's Queen's Bench judge, as an appeal to appeal, which it wasn't. It was just getting rid of him. So he said the appeal to appeal is denied, but I was just recusing the first judge because he was lying and biased. So I recused the second judge as well, and then because there was 80 counts of bias between the 2 of them, it was actually found in my favor. Because when you've got biased judges under certain rules, 3.531, I think it is, in combination with another rule, you are allowed to find in your favor with the courts, because effectively twice the judges have been absent. And bias means it's found in your favor. So what they're doing is they're agreeing with me, but they're not putting it affirmatively in writing. They're doing passive acquiescence, right? And rather than cognitive affirmation. So they're kind of waiting for media, really. So what I really want to do is to show all of my visuals, which are quite substantive, and like what I'd like to do is to go through, even with you, with my little videos I've got on me being named as the Holy Grail by Monty Python. Have you seen those on the website?
No.
You can say no. Okay, so in 1975, Monty Python.
Let me just interject this. Now, when you say the website, you're referring to the new website, www.kingof.uk. Right. Yeah, which I just really found out was up just recently. I haven't had time to look at it.
That's fine.
I've seen a lot of it from before, all the things you're referring to, but not this one. So just so everybody knows that that's your new website.
The new website is kingof.uk. And if you're going to order any books or Amazon things, order it through the new website, kingof.uk. If you order anything on the old website, it goes to a deceased account, and they're not letting me transfer the whole thing over.
Right.
So, more obstruction. So the two movies, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, 1975, they've got the writing on the wall, and the writing on the wall, if you flip it left to right and upside down, left to right for the Freemasons, then upside down for the Illuminati, it says Holy Grail, but it also says Gregg Hallett, and it also says 777, meaning Gregory Hallett, Holy Grail, will be running the Shin. And that's 1975. From 1975, the New Zealand government, New Zealand judiciary, and the CIA believed that I was the Holy Grail. And I used to watch Sand on Beach Road in Tauranga in New Zealand, which is the biggest volume harbour, and watch heroin being dropped off boats on a pallet, with the pallet broken open, with dark blue and black jerry cans attached to the broken arms of the pallets. And then two divers and then two wetsuit guys and another two guys on the shore dragging the heroin up. And it was 300 meters, 300 yards of water that was from the channel from that deep, about a foot deep, to no depth at all. So you could actually see them dragging it up. And the person, and then it was taken up to short way up the hill, turn left down to a dead end street to a house that I was gardening the neighbours for, which was a relative of the person in that house. And that person who was in that house then is now the Deputy Prime Minister of New Zealand, called Winston Peters. So in 1975, the heroin was being taken to his place, out of the harbour to his house. And virtually every New Zealand Prime Minister, every leader of the opposition in New Zealand who's become Prime Minister has been a heroin trafficker. And it's called the Queen's Heroin. And that's run by Prince Philip. He uses the heroin to try and eliminate the Holy Grail, who's got a stronger claim to the throne. That's why they're doing it. So they've been taking that on me since I was 15. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Well, maybe not. We may get back up to this session or the next one. Are you finished describing your case with the two judges and the recusal?
Oh, yeah. So the what's happening is that the £10,000 I put forward, what the judges are doing is denying cases with a line. It takes them 5 minutes to deny a case, and they keep £10,000 because they're laundering the heroin money.
Interesting.
And I published that in 2015, and it was well received by a lot of people. Yeah, and then so what happened was Elizabeth had to abdicate to me again, and one of the ways they abdicate to me is through heroin.
How so? How so?
Well, bringing it out of the harbour right in front of me so I can see where it's going. And I produced a poster in 2016, large poster showing the illegitimate royal family and how it was illegitimate and who the true royals were, with me on there as well, including Francisco next to me. And the deadline for them to rebut that was 1:001 a.m. on the 1st of January 2017. Now, 40 days means a larger kingdom or a kingdom for longer. So if they're going to acknowledge me, then 40 days after that, which is the 9th or 10th of February, they're going to do something. So what they did is they got 360 kilograms of cocaine and dumped it on the beach right next to, the closest to me, where I am in East Anglia. And if you take 3 different roads to get to that particular location, they're all exactly 40 miles. Right. So what they were saying is, you've got the kingdom, we're dropping heroin and cocaine, and it's symbolically the same thing, called the Queen's heroin. And no one can charge for it. No one's come in and claimed that 360 kilograms of cocaine, right? 360 means the full picture.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Full circle.
40 means bigger, full circle. 40 means a bigger, larger kingdom for longer, and the date being 40 miles, and the date being 40 days after I presented them with the royal family with the poster showing that they were illegitimate and that we were legitimate. They then they stamp that with the value of 360 kilograms of cocaine, which is worth
lots of money.
4 million pounds, maybe 4 million pounds.
It's been a while since I checked the market price. Were they trying to hand off the family business to you?
So, I had a detective come up to me and talk to me about it, and he's fronting by having 2 kids with him, 2 little kids who are about sort of 6 and 7, boy and a girl. Maybe his children, maybe not, maybe just a front. But I told them this. They couldn't work out what it was about, and I told them the story, and they were seriously listening. And then I said, what usually happens is Prince Philip, who's the head of the triumvirate, which is the heroin trafficking, right? Prince Philip's the head of it, right? Because he wants to nab the Holy Grail, because it's a threat to the throne, right? So what Prince Philip invented, he's in the Navy, is he invented the seahorse, which is a screamer. And so they usually dump the heroin, so it's weighted, and it's got a seahorse on it, and goes to the bottom of the sea, and then the seahorse goes up about, let's say, 10 o'clock at night, and for about 20 minutes. It screams in high frequency scream, so you need a screamer decoder so you can hear it. And then you go to that location, you try to get there in 20 minutes before the screamer drops down, and then you grab hold of it, and then you can pull up the heroin. And this time they got 360 kilograms of cocaine, and they let it wash ashore with no screamer. Right? So that's pointing the finger. The heroin traffickers are pointing the finger at Prince Philip, saying, Prince Philip, you're a failure.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So bringing us back to my question.
What can I do? What have I done? What can I do? What am I doing?
Well, it seems like how you've answered it is with the description of the court case and some of the other elements pointing to you in movies and all these things. So I think it's quite clear of all the elements which you want to present in further sessions and in other works that you're going to come out with, all of the cross-referencing, verification, all of that. So let's say that's a given. This is where we're at. But it sounds like what you're describing with the court case, that do you see your direction or requirement is to actually, quote unquote, take the throne? Or do you see it going in a different direction? And where, what is your outcome that you're seeking?
Well, and one of the things I need, because I used to get things signed by notaries in an affidavit, but in about July 2015 or 16, July 2016, the notaries started to refuse to notarize my stuff because they swear 2 oaths to the Queen. But privately, the notaries have said to me, we know the British royal family has been illegitimate for generations, but it's our job. We have to swear 2 oaths, and people rely on us, right? So people know that the British royal family is illegitimate, and they're very aware that James Hewitt is the father of Prince Harry, and they're very aware that Prince William is the son of King Juan Carlos of Spain.
All right.
And I toppled the Queen of Holland in 2013, and I toppled the King of Spain in 2014, which is also actually drawn in the Rosicrucian cosmography. It actually shows the king falling over my cliff face, and actually incredibly accurately draws my cliff face. And I was on that cliff face when King Juan Carlos of Spain had abdicated, and I predicted 6 weeks earlier that he was going to abdicate, and that when he did abdicate on 29th of May, Saturday, at 10 a.m. on radio, Sachin Coburg and Gotha congratulated me at 6 p.m. that night for predicting it. And at the same time that that was happening, Portuguese Navy parked outside my bay and saluted me. That was good. How am I going to go about it, or what am I going to do? It's predicted that the signs or marks would go to a certain point in time, which is 2017, and then stop, and they have. So I've still got to show the marks of 2017, which I would have done, but I was sick for about 5 months. And then after I was sick, and after my webmaster publisher, Ina Commercial, died, my computer then failed 3 times. So hard drive, had to get a new graphics card, had to get another new hard drive, had to get a new keyboard, and had to get a new microphone, had to get a new camera, and all this stuff. Delays. So what I'm trying to do is to possibly get 12 good people to sign my affidavits so that I can put them up on my website so that they can then be acknowledged as legal documents of the many and various ways that I've been made sovereign king, monarch of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and all Ireland. And I have a letter from Queen Victoria saying, you are the, it says assemble and claimant. It's got a blood thumbprint on it. And it says assemble and claimant to the throne and crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and all Ireland. And I was given that letter 3 times in 2010, in 2012, 2013, and 2014. Right, so I have some royal marks that substantiate, but I also have some royal lineage going back to 2nd century, 1st century AD, as well as the 1500s. What happened was to establish the Holy Grail lineage, those who were part of the Holy Grail lineage, who were kings and queens, faked their executions and bred inside children again to produce the Holy Grail lineage that would have royal ancestry, but would also be the true Jesus Mary lineage, which goes back to the Egyptian as well. And they've done that for me. So that was nice. And they've been doing that since 1500s. Mainly 1500s, 1600s. Yeah. And then when Ancestry.com started, they had to, use one family history, right, to show an example so that people would go, oh yeah, if you can discover my history too, I'll give you £5 a month kind of thing. And the family history that Ancestry.com started with was my family history. So I got a lot of my family history for free.
Yeah, well, that's up in Utah with the Mormons, so that's a whole other storyline.
Oh, this is Cape Cod. This is Hallett's at Cape Cod.
Yeah. Well, the Ancestry.com. We've got about, actually we ended up not taking our hour break, so we've got about 15 minutes to wrap up for a 2-hour session.
We can always take a break.
No, let's just, I've got some other things I got to get to this afternoon. So we'll go for about another 12, 15 minutes.
Well, okay, I've got something here that you might like to see.
Okay. You got to move the screen. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Can you see Anubis there? It's the head, the eye, nose, shoulder, head.
Mm-hmm.
Is it showing up in that light?
Yeah, yeah.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what came out of the tree. And also to fulfill the apocalypse thing, the four horses of the apocalypse, there's a horse there. You see a horse head there as well?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
yeah.
what that says, that's confirmation ahead of the house of Joseph. So that split, and from a bit of the tree that remained standing was a lion's face, half a lion's face and half my face, right?
Yeah.
And as the Bible predicts, it says it'll be a lion's face and a man's face, and a horse, and it'll be a monster with 1,000 eyes, which is an oak tree. If you stand under an oak tree and you look at it, it's got eyes in front, many eyes in front, many eyes behind, many eyes within.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's an oak tree. It's just describing an oak tree, you know.
Yeah.
So this is oak, and then I was given this royal mark here, which fits in with the Rosicrucian cosmography.
Mm-hmm.
It is actually the key to the Rosicrucian cosmography. It just slots in twice, so that side and that side, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what it says is, focus. It says,
pull it back a little bit.
Prince Regent John, Duke Governor, Ports of the Algarve, and Duke Governor means king to be. So I was given this, and it fits into the Rosicrucian cosmography, and also slots in here quite nicely. Little thing there. Yeah, so that was the Anubis that came out, and the other side was, left standing was a lion, and then my face there. So, yeah, just fulfilled it, you know.
Mm-hmm. So,
and that's how things are done. I'll present some better pictures of it, you know.
Okay, well, we'll schedule another session soon, but to finish one question I have, many people listening might have the same question. How are you protected or secure where you're at now in terms of your personal safety? And you said that your hard drives were taken and things like that. Do you have your documentation in your electronic archives replicated and secure?
Well, see, the other thing they did was massive financial attack.
Yeah, right.
Like I didn't have PayPal even from 2007 to a couple of months ago. So for about 11 years, and for 11 years. And the reason they do that is because they want you to note the number 11. Right. 11 is really important. 11 degrees, 11 years.
They like the number 11.
They like it. They like it. So they've marked me with the number 11. So in terms of the other thing I've got here came out of the tree. I might as well show you now. Is Zeus's thunderbolts came out of the tree. You know, from the
Okay.
No, I'm just. It's like, you know, if you've got things, if you're not being hindered, you can make plans.
Sure.
But I've just got to rely on my senses. I know when there's a target person around, you know, that's targeting me or whatever, or focusing on me, I sort of sense it. But Yeah, so nothing.
Mhm. Just rely on the cosmos for your security.
I do,
Yeah.
entirely. Yes, I do. I do. And I've seen what's happened to some people who've tried to attack me, and it's just phenomenal, phenomenal what happens to them. And
Mhm.
I just do nothing, absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And they're having fits and all sorts of
Mhm.
problems. Yeah.
And back to the question of your archives and so forth. You have those secured and replicated.
Um, no, it's the next job. It's the next job.
Okay. All right.
I've just, well, what they've done is, I would have done that straight away, but then, I had to spend quite a bit of money fixing the hard drive and getting another hard drive and getting a graphics card and getting a new keyboard and getting a new
Yeah.
camera and a new
But I mean,
microphone.
the things that were taken when your publisher, I guess, after she died, their offices were raided and stuff. Were those? Uh, um, you said that was a backup. So do you have?
That was a backup, yeah. So someone working for the Windsors, actually with the surname Windsor, stole my 4 terabyte hard drive in London.
Yeah.
And so
Keep in mind for the future, backup's supposed to be buried in a can somewhere where they don't know where it is.
yeah, yeah. Well, it was in the middle of the Black Forest, 5 hours drive from any airport. It was pretty well hidden.
Yeah.
So what they did is they just got people in the most vulnerable situation and then took advantage of that. So what they do is on everyone now, they have a fall cycle. Like, if we wanted to get rid of this person, what things would we need to engage and disengage to topple that person to ruin everything, right? And they go, okay, we'll kill the publisher, we'll give their child a sickness, we'll stop a payment on a couple of jobs, we'll stop them getting PayPal, any commission emails will stop, we'll stop any finances coming in from overseas, we'll hassle him with phone calls, we'll restrict his phone calls so he doesn't get all his phone calls. The on button on his phone won't work, will work periodically, and then random stuff will come up. We'll prevent his book sales, and what we'll do is we'll get book orders for books that are out of publication, and we'll put those just enough that he'll publish, and then he won't get any more orders after that, so he'll be in debt on the books. And then he's got £40,000 up and he's printed all these books, which are worth £400,000. So we'll steal 90% of those and we'll make it look like other people did it. And so we'll give him no access to those books and we'll give him no communication as to whether those books are still there or not. We'll steal his hard drives and we'll stop all communication from his publisher. We'll deny him access to the lawyer, the death certificate, so he won't be able to transfer the Amazon account to his own name, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, we'll steal his car, and which they've done, and we'll steal his camera, and we'll steal his other hard drive, and we'll gang stalk him on the various groups and talk shows around, and we'll have military people inviting him to talks, and that's with military people undercover. And we'll steal as much information of them as we can there and invite them back on the promise of a bigger trip, but make it less a trip with the same people not listening. And then we'll record them in absolute blur vision with really poor sound quality from a terrible angle with all paraphernalia with the mic recorded on omnisound, not directional mic. And we'll get that video to him 7 months late and we'll do that repeatedly. It's just phenomenal. So instead of, and the other thing, we'll put him in court for 18 years, and then we'll charge him with someone else's criminal record, and then put him in his name, and then we'll put so many cases against him, which are all bogus, but it'll actually take him his entire lifetime to get off those bogus cases, some of which were actually 1,000 miles from where he lived, or sorry, 800 miles. Just goes on and on and on, and it's just what they're doing. It's leaving a trail, confirmation that they know who I am.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do this otherwise because, people go, you're the most targeted individual I've ever met, right? Mm-hmm. And they test me biologically and they go, you've got responses like you're in fight or flight for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
you know. And so just go with it, you know. I can't do anything else. And the other thing they did is, yeah, and I won't go to that. Yeah, so what they're trying to do is to make me illegal in every country in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're trying to do. And they started doing that in 1988, when I first went to the Tower of London, where two of my ancestors were supposedly executed, but weren't. They immediately changed the immigration rules so that someone born in New Zealand used to have a grandfather born in England. They could go to the UK and work, and they immediately changed it to someone whose father was born in England could reside and work in the UK. So they changed that law to try and stop me getting into the UK. And then, so I've been Amsterdam for 15 months, and I'm allowed there 3 months in Holland. And a female blonde immigration agent comes up to me on a Friday night about 10:30 at night in January 2013 and says, "How come you're here? How come you're allowed to be here for so long?" And I said, "Oh, I've got a bunch of titles." So I reeled off my titles, you know, which is some of them are quite lofty, like Lord Chancellor of the Kingdom of England, etc., and Lord Chancellor of the Duchy of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. And she said, "I believe you." And she went back and told Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands,
Mm-hmm.
and then she resigned on the Monday.
Wow.
And then similar thing with King Juan Carlos of Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And I also organized the laws of succession. Which I did in 2010, and then Queen Elizabeth enacted that in 2014 and backdated it to 25th of April 2013, which was the day I was elevated above her.
Mm-hmm.
So that was another abdication.
Yeah.
And I was registered in the Holy See as a member of the Star family, which means descended from Jesus and Mary, which all the royals of the UK and Europe try to claim descendancy from in order to substantiate their monarchies.
Right.
So
Yeah, I was going to bring up that sector, the church, the Holy See. We'll have to bring that in session number 2.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are done in terms of 2 hours. I wanted to. I was going to bring this in earlier and discuss it, but we'll end with this and pick it up next time, because I still have that posed question: where do we go from here? I mean, I'm very clear what you're dealing with, where you've come from, who you are, what you're doing in terms of not only legitimizing, but substantiating by essentially stepping into the role, your position. Because for me, it still always gets back to the practicality. What are we going to do to clean up this world? I believe very firmly, I know very firmly, we are going to do that. We've already achieved what we need to ensure that. And now we just have to move through the last layers of resistance, which you've just described in the last 5 minutes. So I'm very pleased to meet you. And I wish to establish a very firm grounding of cooperation and collaboration. Pantera and Gemstone are going to significant levels of what we're going to achieve. And behind my question about responsibility and what are you going to do, it's more what are we going to do, because I consider that question as an inclusive question. People who are really committed to seeing this world turned around are coming together, have already come together. And so I'm really pleased to make this connection with you. And so I'm going to finish with what I just looked at earlier before we started. On your new website, you have a quote under About. And this is a quote from the meditations of Emperor Caesar Marcus Aurelius Antonius, who ruled or was Caesar from 161 to 180. Quite possibly Jesus' great-great-great-great-grandson, as per your writing in The Hidden King of England, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the quote that obviously you feel very strongly about, or you wouldn't put it at the top of about in your new website, I'll read it as, constantly regard the universe as one living being, having one substance and one soul, and observe how all things have reference to one perception, the perception of this one living being, and how all things act with one movement, and how all things are the cooperating causes of all things which exist. Observe, too, the continuous spinning of the thread and the contexture of the web. So what we've been talking about is the continuing spinning of the contexture of the web of the history of this world, that which is seemingly known, which is all a lie, and that which is hidden, which is now being revealed on the waves of the apocalypse, so that the first shall be last and the last shall be first. And so we have a lot of responsibility in that to move forward.
There's code in that. The first shall be last and the last shall be first. And it's the last person to represent the end times new age was Jesus, or otherwise known as Joshua, Emmanuel, John, Yeshua, John Ram. His descendants were the 5 good emperors. And what you just read from Emperor Caesar, Marcus Antonio Aurelius, was more spiritual writing than in the entire Bible. And he's an Emperor Caesar, and he's supposed to be a big bully.
Yeah.
Right? But he wasn't. He was, and they all were extremely spiritual people because they were taught by Jesus, who survived his execution and lived in just above Pharaoh in the Algarve, who wrote the Book of Predictions, which mentions me, and now I'm sort of named in various movies, including the 1961 Italian movie La Notte, means the night. What was your other question? There was another angle to it.
I was just not really, I mean, we have questions pending, but we'll have to pick them up next time. It's,
but it's fantastic. It's a fantastic quote. And so the Caesars were more spiritual than the entire Bible. And Jesus' writings were actually removed from the Bible by Paul. And the Bible is actually Paulist. It's not
Pauline. Yeah.
Pauline. Yeah. It's Paulism. He wrote at least a third of the Gospels, maybe more, and they took the Jesus stuff out. Now, where it says the first shall be last and the last shall be first, it says, I am the Alpha and Omega, which is I am the first and the last. But it's actually I am the Omega and the Alpha, which means I represent the end times and the new age.
Mm-hmm. The last and the first, the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what it's about. The whole thing is the code for who represents the end times new age.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the Omega and the Alpha, which is when you consider the saying, the first shall be last, the last shall be first. Alpha and Omega becomes Omega and Alpha.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, the Romanization of all of that with the Paul lineage and the Roman Church taking over, I mean, it's part and parcel of the same thing, the overlay of the false reality.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's actually worse than that, because Paul was working for Emperor Nero, and Emperor Nero faked his suicide, and Paul died at the same time.
Mm.
And then Nero, in his fake suicide, became an ancestor of the Rothschild family.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's also the linguistic symbology of Saul, which is the son, converting to Paul, which is or Pa, which is the father, and then it all gets embodied in this so-called apostolic succession with the father, the Pope, which gets into the you know, the Holy See, and you talked earlier about the sea, emerging from the sea. All the work that I focus on and that we bring forward has to do with how the entire legal system of bondage. And I've written a document that I'll send you when we get off air. We'll exchange contact, called "The Overview of the World System of Bondage and Separation from Life." And I go very extensively into related complementary things to what we're talking about. But it's all about being lost. And I know you talked about the letter C, or the word C is a homophone of the letter C. You've got the sea, S-E-A, as in the ocean, and then we're considered lost at sea when you get into the Cestui Que Act and the lost of a Cestui Que, or the living beneficiary for the estate. And unless and until you return from being lost at sea and come back into the living, standing on the land, then you're controlled by the Holy See, which is supposed to be the seatus sanctum, the holy seat, or the apostolic succession, the seat of Peter, and all of that. So these are things I've studied for years. I'd like to have another conversation with you of where I've come through studying all this, seeing the symbology and the weaving of the web, the false web. Because that quote that I just read is about the true web, the web of life, the web of creation, and who we really are here. That's why keep posing the question, our responsibility and what we're here to do in re-establishing the true web of creation, the interwoven fabric of all living being and life and all of that. So the sea that we're lost in is the sea of commerce, with a capital C, or the letter C. And commerce is the false overlay of the bondage system and the monetary system, where we all become the bondage surety to the perpetual debt system and all of that. So I'll start sharing that with you. And it
was Abe Lincoln that freed the black slaves, and then enslaved the whites and all of us.
Well, yeah. Well, that gets into the 14th Amendment and the so-called Emancipation Proclamation. But, we don't have time for that now. But I'll send you that document, and I'm sure it'll give you some interesting insights. Because, we've been with the Civil War since 1861. We've been under military occupation. And then once the third crown of the Triple Crown, or the Unum Sanctum and the Triregnum, was established in Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia, which is, Columba is Latin for dove, as is Dovid, which is a mirroring of David. So all of this Columbia stuff worldwide, the country of Columbia, British Columbia, District of Columbia, has to do with the image of the dove that people think means peace, but it's really this false Davidic line that's been usurped. And DC created the Triple Crown, or the third of the Triple Crown, with the City of London, which you go into in The Hidden King, all that detail of how all the markings, all the metrics of the geometry and all of that, which I found quite extraordinary. And it substantiates what I've studied and come to understand for years about what the City of London is and its function with the Rothschild Bank and the Bank of England, and the law and the bar system, the Temple Bar, which you talked about. And that's the Triple Crown: Vatican City, City of London, DC. And DC is about the commercial system. So they put all of the original United States into a corporatized system and put it into a commercial construct, and all the land and the people and the souls and the flesh were put into as the bonded surety of this false matrix of the monetary system into perpetual debt. So what we're really doing is leading the people out of being lost at sea, wrapped in that sea of commerce and the Holy See, so forth, and bringing them back to the land and rooting the people and the original stewards and the new stewards back on the land to refurbish and rehabilitate, heal this world. So that's
I think
behind my question when I say, where do you see yourself going in your role and so forth? And so
I think that the way they did that in the Bible was Jesus walking on water.
right, exactly. Well,
You know?
very, very specifically, I'll tell you exactly where to look. It's in the book of Matthew, chapter 8, verse 22, where it says, Jesus said to his disciple, who said, I need to go see my father who is dying. And Jesus said, let the dead tend to the dead, because the entire global system is a system of civil death. When you're in the civil body, which is a controlled containment field, you're considered dead and you're acted upon as dead. So when you're going into their courts, whether it's in England, United States, Australia, wherever, these are courts of death. They're adjudicating the dead. Okay, and it goes back to Egyptian, which I go into in the overview document. The whole book of the dead and passing through the test of the heart and the feather and all of that, which was Osiris, the god of the underworld. And
Osiris, it was Anubis, and then he was changed to Osiris.
Right.
So there's two original Egyptian gods, Anubis and Isis, and then they've got hundreds of other names stemming from them.
Right, exactly. And exactly.
But what they did with me and the walking of the water thing is they enacted that for me, and they built a floating platform about 170 meters from me for me to walk on water in exactly the same place that the apostles rode and where Jesus was standing, and then to land. And then there's a place that you can stand on the water and on the land at the same time.
Right. Okay.
Right. And it's all predicted in the Bible. And then they opened it symbolically on my birthday. Right. And then the person who invented it's called a mulberry. And the person who invented it is Vice Admiral Sir John Hughes Hallett, as in John Hughes Hallett.
Who is Hallett?
Yeah, John Who is Hallett.
Hey, John, who is Hallett? Yes.
Yeah. And they say there will be no one called John in his family and in his family history, and everyone will be amazed at how his name is John. So what they did is they built the mulberry floating platform, and the person who invented it was John Hughes Hallett.
Okay.
Right? And then
so back to Matthew 22. So he says, let the dead tend to the dead. That's describing the entire global legal monetary system and the system.
Yeah, well pointed.
Yeah. But then the very next verse, they're suddenly on the Sea of Galilee on a boat. Yeah. And Jesus and the disciples are there, and the boat is on the waters, and a storm comes up, and the waters are unsettled. Well, when you're lost at sea and submerged under the sea of commerce in debt and bonded debt suretyship, your waters are unsettled. You have no stasis or stability. So the storm comes up, the disciples go into fear. They don't know how to calm their own waters of commerce, so they look to the master and say, help us, and he calms the sea. So walking on water, calming the sea, letting the dead tend to the dead, it's all about how to remove oneself from the bondage of the matrix, aka the sea of commerce.
Well pointed. Well done.
Yeah. So I'll send you the document. You can read it, and we'll get together soon. We'll talk about that, and we'll get back to where we left off. Okay?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ken.
I'm going to stop the recording